Hello, y'all. How is everyone? My name is Aida Cuadrado Bozo, and I'm so excited to be with you here today. And that you chose out of all of the amazing conversations to have, right? That you are here to talk about conflict, right? Oh, I see some of my homies in the chat. Hola, I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, conflict. It's like so many things, right? And we're gonna get into it, right? I'm gonna share a couple things, and then I want to spend some time jumping in with you about like what it is that makes it so interesting about conflict, right? I'm gonna use the word interesting because it's so many things, right? So again, welcome. I am going to. Can y'all hear me? Okay? Am I getting feedback? Okay. So I wanted just to go over real quick our time together. Welcome, right? We're doing it. Look at that. Check number one off right off the list, right? Hope y'all feel accomplished already. I want to define a couple of terms and languages, that I'm going to be using and that will might come up so that we're kind of like on the same page, right? Sometimes we use jargon a lot in some of our work, and I just want to make sure that we're here together using a similar language. And if you got a new word, I'm excited for you to teach me, right? I want to share a little bit about like understanding why conflict happens from my experience, and then like what's my approach to it. And then the yummiest part of this entire conversation is going to be us in a discussion about whatever it is that comes up for us around conflict, and we're going to lean into like each other's brilliance, knowledge, and whatever else is there for us, right? Because it's all okay. No perfect conflict style, so they say. So, but first, before we jump into that, I gotta know who I'm in the space with. So I want to know like who are y'all, right? Like who's here? Because this space, like, as you know, if you went to the plenaries, there are magical people here, and I imagine you're magical too. So I'm just curious about you know, like like what do your favorite people call you? My favorite people call me Titi Mimi, right? The title of like endearment. It's my, you know, what brings you to this space? Like, I'm curious about this. What are you hoping to learn? And where are you from? Right, Maida, I'm from Potawatomi land here in Lansing, Michigan, by way of Puerto Rico. Right, simple as that. So like, drop that in the chat for me. Like, maybe we're like next door neighbors, and I have no idea, and I would really love to know that. Right, so I can come sit on your porch with you. Right? So yeah, I'm curious about what do your favorite people call you? What's bringing you to this space? Where are you from? And what are you hoping to learn? Yeah? Is that cool? I'll give you a minute to drop that in the chat. But if you're like, yo, I'm ready to just share with you out loud, I've been sitting here quiet this whole time. I'm with that too. Hey, what's up, Eric? I see ya. Oh, you incredible people. I'm like going through my all the little pictures here. See y'all in your little cubicles. Virtual cubicles. Oh yeah, come on the other side. Yeah, that's a good one, Lisa. It's good to know. I'm just really happy that you know that there's the other side, right? Around conflict. Sometimes we get in it and like you just it's impossible to almost see it, right? To get to the other side there. Yeah. Okay, y'all. Dua Rahima. Hey, Dua Rahima. Hello. Welcome. Yes. Okay. Your favorite people call you mom. Nana. Here to learn and support from my family. Okay. All right. Look at all these. Look at all my. Look at this. So great. Okay, California. Yo, the West Coast is showing up real deep right now. I don't know how I feel about that. but I am grateful. Yeah. Growing my comfort and practice of oh yeah, this is all good stuff. Let's do this. All right, so let's learn together because I wish the girl had a ride, but she hasn't around conflict. I prefer it when it's other people's conflict and not mine, if you feel me. So, yeah, it gets ickier when it belongs to me. So I wanna lean into some of the things that's helped me in the movement, like, and in my work to lean into it. So I want to talk a little bit about language. And me using this term called interdependence. It's the dependence of two or more people or things or each other, right, to achieve a goal. Right. I'm going to talk about this thing called principal struggle, which offers another way, a way to struggle in which we are being not conflict avoidant or conflict aggressive, but rather engaging in generative conflict, right? Conflict that grows each of us and creates more possibilities for what we can do in the world
Me
together,
too.
right? That sounds pretty dope, right? And then like I'm using this concept like generative, like oh, like what is generative, right? And Merriam-Webster, the good old classic, describes it as having the power of function to generate or originating, producing, and reproducing. I like to think about like when two things rub together, there's like good tension, something else becomes more possible, right? Because these two things are like mixing together or in tension with each other, like something else is produced, right? Like yeah. And then conflict, which is a mental struggle resulting from incompatible or opposing needs, drives, wishes, or internal and external demands. Conflict, right? Which is a little bit different than disagreement, right? Disagreement is like, yo, I don't like it where you put, I move the chair here, this is where I like the chair, and you're like, well, this is where I like the chair. That's like a disagreement. Or like, we might be in disagreement around our political values, right? But it becomes more like conflict, right? When your opinions or policies or now start harming me, right? It's a different kind of it's a whole other level. I just want to name that because sometimes it's real easy to think like, oh, I'm in a disagreement, and go right into fight mode. So I just want to bring that into our consciousness that we're talking a little bit about, actually something that feels like it's, causing me some kind of harm or I feel vulnerable in some way. So, y'all still with me? I gotta see some yeses, some loves in the hearts. Y'all here with me? Okay. All right. Uh, so the next spot I want to lean us into is like why transform conflict? Yo, because it's what liberation requires of us. Man, that's all it is, right? No, it's uh because we are my experience in the movement so far has been that like we know how to fight, right? Like I know we know how to fight. Like I know how to do an action on somebody. I know when I'm like want to be like when I'm right. I know when there's like my boundaries are being caused and I gotta fight you. But we necessarily don't know how to be in what I call like a generative conflict, right? It's like oh we got to figure this out together, right? We're building a whole new world where some of us have never experienced it before, can't recognize it, kind of have an idea. We're still healing from all of our trauma, right? And we got to like figure this out, right? So the way we think about conflict is, I like to think about it being more of a generative place. Oh, this is an opportunity for me, like to really understand another person, understand what's going on around me, and definitely understand what's going on with myself, right? Sometimes we think about conflict as being external, and it's really good to take some time to think about conflict being an internal process, right? And so when we think about generative conflict, it can occur when people involved, right? Like, oh, either like how does that happen, right? Well, when when people are involved in a natural life surrounding them experiences mutual support for change that brings about life affirming conditions, right? So we make assumptions. We move in a world all the time where it's like, oh man, I'm really mad at somebody, right? I'm really mad about what's happening at home, or I'm really upset about what's happening at work. I feel this way. This is how it impacts my daily life, right? And then by moving towards a generative conflict experience, right, where it's like, oh, you know what, let's say Trish made me upset or something, right? We all met Trish this morning, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna move towards conflict in a generative way so that when Trish and I come to work together, something else becomes more possible, right? I know that sounds like easier said than done. I agree, but I promise, like my little round bubble on the right hand side here says, promise that on the other side it's so much better, right? Again, we tend to stick in fighting, right? So why conflict shows up? I'm moving through these slides, babes, because I'm so excited to be in conversation with you. I wanna like jump in, right? I wanna also just okay. We'll do this and I'll go back to something I missed. But so, my experience with conflict, right, which I've been doing a lot of work with it, especially in the nonprofit space, around organizations that are just trying to figure it out, right? We are looking at trying to transform the way that we, no worries, Corey. I miss you too, boo. I don't even know you, but it's all good, right? Um, like, we are looking at trying to transform the way our systems are inside our organizations. We're trying to rethink policies, procedures. That's going to cause conflict because those things benefit somebody, right? And some of it benefits us. I don't know what, and some of it doesn't. So, as we are thinking about what it means to develop a new organizing structure or a new organization or the way we move in the world, it's going to cause some kind of conflict, right? And every single time that I've come across it or experienced it in culture or organizations, it's because conflict comes forth as an intentional or even an unconscious disruption. Like some people don't even know they're either causing conflict or experiencing conflict, right? And it's usually because of a feeling of vulnerability, right? Something is super vulnerable. Like, for example, I'm gonna give a quick example. Oh, well, I'm feeling I'm in conflict because so and so embarrassed me, right? I'm feeling like I'm exposed is one, or like when there's a conflict around my values and morals, right? When we're not in agreement around that, I'm feeling like my personal policies, my morals and values, excuse me, are vulnerable at that moment in time, right? So there's always some kind of and I want to also say that it's because it's this vulnerability that actually creates a possibility for us to like lead into some kind of resolution or conflict, right? I know this sounds kind of crazy all right now, but I promise you it is. But I want to like pause, right? I want to pause and like lean in with you just for this moment before I like lean into like, yo, what are some of my practices to see how that's landing around like when I say that conflict is usually because of some kind of vulnerability, right? We experience, and then our response to conflict is a whole nother thing. But I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because you're the yummiest part of this. Yeah, stop sharing. And the question on the table is just like, yeah, I want to hear like how do you feel about me saying that usually conflict comes from either um an unconscious or intentional disruption because there's a feeling of vulnerability. Does that make sense at all? Okay, see the chat here. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Adria, and I just made you total Latinx. I don't mean to be disrespectful. But that's true. Conflict is in the org context as a result of whatever being discussed or is benefiting someone. And Doris said, absolutely, that can be the driving factor of conflict. Yeah. Anyone else?
I can add, 'cause I feel
Oh,
like I'm in one of those moments today, if that's okay.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I think on that piece around vulnerability, there's also this element of, like, there can be multiple truths in a situation, but when folks feel called and compelled to speak to their truth or having their authentic voice lifted up, so there's many times where I've been in conflict and probably continue to hold space for conflict, maybe not in a generative way, because I'm like, wait a minute, is my truth being communicated the way I want it to be communicated in my authentic voice? Maybe, maybe not. So I'm going to say something or I'm going to do something. And I feel like that there's an element to the vulnerability of like, I mean, vulnerability is also a gift, but if you feel like the vulnerability that's being shared isn't your authentic way of being vulnerable, then it can also further conflict in generative and unconstructive ways, or at least I've
Mhm.
seen that for myself.
Oh yeah, for sure, Valerie. Thank you for speaking up because I couldn't see your little raised hand is so tiny that I couldn't see it. So I really appreciate that, y'all. Yes, yeah, all that yumminess. It can be yeah, in order like I want to also say that generative conflict becomes more possible when you have something called psychological safety, you know? Like you can feel a little bit more, you feel comfortable and safe enough to be vulnerable, right? And that like vulnerability also triggers the whole different part of your brain sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm vulnerable. I'm either gonna fight you, right? Fight, flight, fawn, freeze. I don't know if you guys ever heard that, but we respond differently when our amygdala is triggered. Yeah. Let's see. Anger can be easier emotion to lean into because it presents as an illusion of power. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we learned it from, there's a lot of places we learned how to deal with conflict, right? Like our childhood, our culture, our neighborhood. And for many of us, it's from conflict means and feels bad, right? It feels like, oh, I'm going to automatically be in some kind of fight, right? Like I got to survive this somehow, right? It goes into a whole nother place. So yeah, I agree with that, right? And I'm just grateful for those reflections. Let me see. I saw some more. Vic says, yeah, sitting with that, but for so many of us, so many of the conflicts in my life, that's definitely true. Yeah, totally agree. I know when I feel some kind of way, there's a learning opportunity. White supremacy culture, fear, conflict. Oh, absolutely, Shannon. I mean, you know when there's some beef in the room when nobody's saying nothing at work. You be in that car, people be like crickets, like, and you're like, okay, everyone's looking at each other, right? Um, the real meeting happens outside, so yes, there's a lot of avoidance around conflict, right? Or just having direct conversations. And so it's definitely definitely a muscle. Um it's definitely a muscle that we need to start practicing, right? And building. I liked how who's my homegirl this morning? She just said about cleaning house, right? I forgot her name. If somebody remembers her name and can drop it in the chat for me. But when she said we gotta be cleaning the house, I'm like, yeah, like, yes, not net, yes, so dope. I was like, we gotta clean the house around conflict, right? About being really direct about it, because it's an act of love, right? I know that sounds really crazy, but when I think about the kind of conflict conversations I have with people that I love, it feels totally different, right? Say, hey, I got to put this boundary up. We got to talk about this, before we can even move on, for those of us, who like are real clear about that. But all right, let's go back to the share screen. I want to share a little bit more about what I've learned about like my approach to it, right? My approach to how I deal with conflict. People call me in all the time to like have conversations with their organizers or like their staff or with themselves, and most of the time it's two things are happening. Like there's a real lack of accountability culture in the organization, right? Or like folks do not like conflict, they are conflict adverse, right? And that's okay. I really love how Erica said she's soft earlier, right? I think she's soft, or I don't know, was it plush or I don't know. When she said it, I was like, I imagine a big marshmallow, right? Like, and I love that because we don't have to. Conflict style can show up in any kind of way, whatever your vibe is. It's all about how we approach it and our attitude, right? And like the more I know, like when I know I'm going to talk to Erica, like I can't go in there yelling at Erica because I know my girl is soft, like not in a bad way, not like soft in the street soft, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying like, my approach is with love with her, right? Yeah, delicate flower. Thank you, Erica. Oh, hi, babe, you're in here. Okay, great. So yeah, let me share my screen. And again, I'm here to learn from y'all. So I hope we leading into a little bit more with this together. All right. We paused for a second. All right. I take a very purposeful response to when I know I'm feeling a certain way about something, right? And like I'm be honest, like I want to just be super honest about something. Conflict is forever, baby. It's gonna be with you from ahora mismo, right now, to like, the day you transition to whatever other being you're going to be. It's gonna be around, right? So why not practice it? Why not learn how to be like, ugh, this feels yucky, but let me try something with it. Let me pause for a moment and be with it. So I always tell folks when they're asking me to come and have conversations with them, their staff organizations around like how do we have this conversation? And I mean it's tough conversations. It could be around gender, race. It could be around abuse that's happened. It could be around just a disagreement on ideas, right? But like I like to invite them into the approach, right? First and always, 100%. I either's going to always say, "Yo, you got to start with your own shit," You like you gotta sit in the mirror and you gotta be like, okay, what is going on with myself? Why am I feeling this way? Right? What is going on? Right? I mean, like really sit with it. Some of us, when we get hangry, we get in conflict like immediately. And what's really going on, you're just hungry. You feel me? You know what I'm talking about, right? But like, there's other bigger examples of, when we think about the iceberg, like what's underneath of what's really getting in the way. Sometimes it can be as small as like, yo, I kind of feel disrespected, gotta name that vulnerability. And some of it sometimes can be as bad as like, this shit's from my childhood. When so and so did that, it reminded me of something that happened to me 30 years ago, right? You also have to understand understand your culture and that of others, right? Like so, how you approach conflict with someone is really important, and there's not like one way. It's like a scale of approaches, right? And we know this, right? We speak to children, we speak to our elders differently, right? We speak to our parents and our sisters and aunties differently, right? And leaning into one that matches so that you can be heard, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I either grew up in Saginaw, Michigan. It's easier, like, for me just to be like, you know what, F all of this. Let's just take this to the streets, That's like my usual natural response. But it's not as powerful as leaning into like, okay, what's really going on here, right? So the invitation, the first step is to always pause and to ask yourself some real hard questions, right? And the second part of like what I always tell folks is like you got to be committed to something, right? Like, you gotta be on purpose and ask yourself, am I moving from purpose, right? So I'm always like, yo, I believe that everyone around me should have say in how things go, and that includes myself, right? So if I'm gonna be in conflict with someone, like let's say Katie's, I was like, okay, well, I believe that Katie should have her opinion too, right? Most of the time, as a Capricorn myself, I want just people to agree with me so we can move forward, right? So that's just something that comes up with me, right? And then also like, I have saying how it goes too. Some of us who are conflict averse like lean back and be like, well, I'm not gonna start any trouble. It's fine. No, I'm gonna lean in. I have my purpose is that I have say in how it goes, and around me, everyone is always present to their own greatness, and that includes myself. So what I have to say is also important, right? So that's an invitation. Like, what is your purpose in this work that you're up to, right? How do you ground yourself in your purpose before you move in an approach to generative conflict or transformative conflict, right? And then who can you call? Right? Who can you call on to so like you can process and discern and like get clear on what you want out of this conversation, right? Like I love my partner, but the homie always wants to fix something. I'm just like, no, I just need you to hear me out. I love you, but no, chill. But if I call my sister, she's like, yo, when are we ready to ride? So I'm like, maybe my sister's not the best decision at this moment in time. But like, who can you actually call if you cannot get out of your feelings, if you can't ground in purpose, who can you actually call? Who's that person who's going to be like, well, you know, Lisa or Juana, like this is what you said you was committed to, right? What do you want to, who is going to help you move through in the way that you truly want to move through, right? Get to that conflict part. And then how do you stay in it? Whew, Lord knows. I'm like, I don't know if you've ever been on the meetings. Like, y'all want to have this call because I want to talk to so and so because I want to get it done and I want to get it done and over with. That's not necessarily how conflict works. In fact, conflict tends to be a little habitual. It comes back all the time, right? And sometimes with the same people. And so the invitation is like, how do I stay committed to my purpose, right? And how to stay committed to the agreements that I set for myself and this person as we're working through this conflict, right? How you show up is so important. And then how do you emerge in it? Because look, a lot of people always say to me, like, oh, I don't want to go into the conflict, right? I don't want to pause what we're doing because they approach it with like, a binary approach, right? Oh, well, like, if we're working on the internal conflict, we can't move forward with the external work that no, you can, right? You can if you're committed to a larger purpose together, right? And then always like the accountability and like what happens next. Like you have to be able to emerge, right? You have to be able to be like, okay, this is a conflict. This is what we're committed to. This is how we hold each other accountable. And then this is how we move forward. And you don't have to remember all these questions because I created a really cool worksheet for you guys so you guys can have it afterwards, right? So I just wanted to name these are like my 5 steps, right? My 5 steps to like being like, when someone is testing me, how do I pause, right? And be like, all right, Aida, who are you in this moment? Because you are committed to liberation, that which is larger than me, you, and this whole conflict. This conflict 10 years from now won't even matter, right? So, and then just a reminder that it's an act of love, right? It's an act of love for yourself to like set this boundary, to have a direct conversation with someone, right? And then to like really, and to move from a place that is committed to something better, to larger, right? Yeah, this is my pause line. I gotta put that in there and then I'll chat a little bit. I wanna like bring us back to the conversation here. I'm curious about how y'all are feeling about that approach. And if you have any questions around it. Nada? Does it feel hard? Yeah. I say to you, mind leaning in with me? Tell me about what feels hard about it. Let's talk about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been engaged in something around conflict transformation for a while, and I think the hardest part is just staying in the tension
Mm-hmm.
and staying in it when other people aren't committed to staying in it with you. That is really tough. That's really tough. Yeah.
It is really tough. What are some things that you do to help you stay in it, if you don't mind sharing?
Um, I think I like what you were saying about having the people who know what you're committed to and can hold you accountable in those moments when you want to squirm out of it. Um, so like just it's really about accountability. So journaling for me is a big thing, just making sure I'm in integrity, checking in, like am I in right relationship with everything in the universe? If I'm not, what do I need to do to become in right relationship? And again, it's like even in those moments when people are not engaging in the process with you, how are you? You know, what are the letters that you're writing and keeping in the drawers? Like, what are the ceremonies that you're doing? Like that sort of things. Yeah.
I love that. I say to you, thank you so much. You know, because
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, I was just, I'm in conflict right now with someone, right? And like, um, I carry it with me sometimes, so it's hard for me to compartmentalize it sometimes and put it in its pockets. But I love the practice of letters, right? Once I pull out my notebook, I can actually get to sleep. Like, this is what I should have said. This is what I really want to say. Like I will probably burn those, right?
Yeah.
Like, but thank you
And
for that.
then, and one more thing I just want to offer. So I like the model. There's like this therapeutic model called IFS, but basically it's like you have the child part, the protector part, and then the self. And
Mm,
so I like to write when I'm in conflict. I like to write from that child part that's like holding the wounds and holding the abandonment, holding the fear, holding the sadness.
yeah.
And then that protector part is like, we're going to beat you up at sunset. Da, 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 da. You know, that protector, like, you shouldn't have, because when I said, and then you, da, da, da. And so I like to let them all write out their things. And then the
Yeah.
self is like that essence, that like pure love, compassion, connecting, who's just I let that part of me read through everything. And then that part usually comes forward and is like, I hear you, I hear the pain, and this is what we're actually gonna do, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
is a practice that I also like, that I want to offer the group.
Oh, I love it. That's yummy. That's super yummy. I'm seeing in the chat, there's like people responding. I saw a for real up in here. Who said that? It was Juana. Where you at, Juana? Let me find you in my. Oh, I see Juana down there. Juana said,
I'm
for
here.
real, for real. You want to lean in? You were really vibing with the say too.
Yeah, I think that I feel that resonates for me is like when we're push ourselves to discomfort, but folks aren't always ready to receive or also lean in to it with us. I think, there's something there about meeting someone where they're at and also lovingly pushing each other past our comfort zones.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very uncomfortable. So I just want to honor that because it's very true. While we hold intention, also we have to recognize sometimes that dynamic plays out as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Juana. Loving this
I had
headband. Sure. Who's
I
leaning
had a
in?
question.
Oh,
This
it's
is
Trish.
Trish. Um,
Hey.
well, first I wanted to just appreciate the practices that SA2 is offering, because like it just is a reminder of like how much of the work is like on yourself first, right? And like sorting out, I think the way that you said it was kind of like what's the stuff that's actually like with another person or like with the party, and what's the stuff that's just like I just have to I just have to talk to myself first. But to go back to the stuff that's interpersonal, you kept talking about agreement, right? Like going back to our agreements or going back to our
Mm-hmm.
like shared purpose. And I guess I just have questions for you about like what do you do in situation when those agreements aren't there? When there's not a thing that was like clearly broken, because there was never like an agreement, a shared agreement to begin with. Um, just any thoughts you have or advice you have about that?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, Trish. Uh, yeah, this we move in the that's a really good point. We move in the world mostly without set agreements, right? With people we work with, people we worship with, or walk to the park with, or even live with. And so, one of the things that like it's important to do is to like, especially within like if I'm put in a context with organizations or work or even the work that we do around conflict, because I'm vibing that many folks here do this work, is creating the conditions for generative conflict, right? And so when you create the conditions for it, it's like, one, being clear on like where your boundaries are, right? You always start with self, right? Um, and agreements that you need, right? I was reading in this curriculum called Calling It Up that Trish Adobe-Achum helped write, was one around creating liberated zones, right? A place where you can actually practice new things and name what does safety look like for you, and trust, um, and love, right? And how do we hold each other accountable? What does accountability actually look like? And like when you look at it from an organization perspective, it's like really getting to a place of like, hey, you know what? We actually have to name uh, like the conditions that we need in order to practice conflict here, right? Because someone was talking earlier, I'm forgetting everybody's name, around like the reality of like punishment, right? And how when you're moving from a place of like addressing conflict or wanting to like build that culture, when the punishment culture lives there, it almost seems impossible. So like we have to transform the way we think about conflict as actually, no, this is actually it's what's gonna get us to be able to create, first of all, I don't know if you've ever been like for yourself, but when you're in a place that you feel freer, you're gonna create bolder and bigger, right? And so we can create places like that where like we can move out punishment spaces, right? Into more of a generative conflict space where we can hold each other accountable in a way that's out of love, right? Then um, uh, we can hold each other to those agreements. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. So it's really important to actually name those. I actually do those with like my teams. Like, hey, these are our agreements as a team, and I'm not talking about community agreements, right? Like those are kind of like that, but this is actually a little bit different. It's how we move in the world. It's how we create space for us to be a little bit different. Liz, all right. Oh my goodness, the chat's blowing up. I appreciate it.
I have a question. How do you create the emotional environment for conflict transformation?
Yeah. Are you saying like at the
Like in an organization, like what are some of the things you can do before conflict arises that like, because I know that we talked about there being vulnerability is a huge part of it.
Mhm.
So what sort of like practices or foundations are being set so that people are even feel that safety to move?
It's a wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. That's a really good question. I think it kind of also talks about like what Trish was talking about, asking a little bit earlier around how do you create those conditions. Um, like I don't want to like get caught up in the fact that like we have to clean up an entire organization around conflict. Like I'm worried about giving any kind of advice around that. Does that make sense? Where it's like, well, this is how you go back and change the entire culture around conflict, right? Like, or like, so that you could be, have a generative conflict place, right? Like, I would just want to say that. But I want to say that, like, there are certain things that you can do first, right? I'm always going to tell you, I say too, is like, start with yourself first, right? And it's like setting, like being really clear on your morals, values, and principles, right? Your boundaries, and like making sure you have clear conversations with those around you who work with you. It's like, hey, you know what? I have a very strong boundary around like my my evenings are mine, right? They're my family's. They don't belong to you, right? And that's just like a very small, easy thing to think about. Or like, you know, the work that I do has to be grounded in my values. So whenever we put anything together, um, mothers will be taken care of, right? It's like moving clearly from those grounded values and morals, right? And actually really clearly naming them with them. But like being really intentional about setting up a container for yourself, right? And then also like inviting others, right? Because like conflict is usually not by yourself. And even though it feels very isolating, it's like how you actually build it out with others, right? So you move it out into having those same conversations, and how do you build a container with your teams around generative conflict, right? How does how do we know we're in agreement around like what does respect look like for each other, for us? What does um, safety look like for each other, and then what does it actually look like in action, right? Yeah.
I just made it to the hotel.
So Adria says that question about statues resonates with me when we think about trust. Can't be vulnerable, or it's hard to be when you don't trust, or if they don't trust. Yeah. Is there other places that that comes up for you at all, Adria?
Yeah, like I'm specifically thinking, especially in professional spaces, when a conflict arises. Let's say it's with a, as you said, it's habitual and maybe the same person. Like it's like, oh, here she go, like and it's like you already know where this person's coming from, and you already know you're not going to be best friends, and you're just kind of trying to work through together to get accomplished what we're seeking to get accomplished. And so like you can't, that you don't trust this person, or like you trust them to be who they are. So like how do you get into that emotional space? Because what I'm gathering, like in the place of being vulnerable where you can have some breakthrough or like get to a point of resolution, or like being able to see each other and hear each other, there has to be some level of trust. And so
Mhm.
that's what I'm kind of grappling with or thinking about a little bit.
Yeah. The good. It is. It's hard to get there. That's why I'm always like, yo, who can I call on? Because right now I ain't seeing it. Like who can get me into this space, this idea of like my purpose, my vision for this, right? Like and how like what's the kind of relationship that I desire out of this, one of the things that I always ask people is like, have you had a direct conversation with this person about it? About the conflict that you're feeling. Did you guys agree on how to address it if it comes up in the future, right? Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna go over here to Kayla. I want to make sure I'm saying this. I can say your last name, Jacque, so I want to say this saying that right. I have a continued conflict with my boss who has admitted she is problematic because of insecurities, but isn't taking steps towards healing herself. So I've lost all trust because she just shows up as a bully. Yeah. I'm seeing people go like this, Kate. Is it Kayla or Kalia?
It's Kiala.
Yeah, I'm jacking all up. Thank you.
Okay. Story of my life.
Yeah. Anybody, and I'm seeing other people who are like, yeah. So how about for other people? Have they had a similar experience where they've been able to like address that conflict with that same problematic person before? SAT was like, no, not me, no. I was like, if I could, no. Just curious. Has anybody tried anything and it's worked or not worked?
I mean, I think just to add to that question, like I often struggle with like, is it possible to reach this generative conflict with people who are unaware of themselves?
Yeah. It's a good question. When I think about conflict, it's always like, it's easier for me to be like, yo, this person, like, and people have seen me like, yo, I ain't got it today. Like, I don't know if I can meet them where they're at in this moment and very time. Right. And then it's like, yo, no, what am I gonna commitment to? I always come back to that. Like, where am I grounding myself in, and what am I committed to, right? Because folks who have not done their healing work, people who are committed to a different structure or culture will always try to disorganize us around who we want to be, right? And the question is like, how do you want to move from that space, right? And sometimes we have to like set a boundary with someone and be like, you know what, we're not going to agree on this. So where are the boundaries that I set so that we can stay on purpose, right? But that like also keep myself safe and keep yourself safe, right? I usually approach conflict and through a conversation, right? And I'm just gonna share with you how I go about that, right? All the time, even when like I feel like I'm gonna throw up, right? Because even though I do conflict all the time, it's still hard emotionally, and it has a toll on folks, right? But I am clear that it's the work that we need to be doing. And I see some hands up. We're gonna do this right quick. Actually, you know what? I don't see the hand. Let me. Oh, I see Brenda and Christina. Okay, well, you know what's up, Brenda and Christina? I don't want to. I want to stay here. Let's talk about this weirdness. Brenda, you first, and then Christina.
Christina was first.
Christina was first. Oh, look at that. Beautiful. Come on through, Christina Garcia.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Yeah, it was like not that important to speak, but yeah, I think I just wanted to chime in about my own personal experience with when it is not when conflict, when I guess the cultivating a space for healthy conflict is impossible. Um, and it's literally my last place of employment where my supervisor, a white woman, go figure, just couldn't enter into that sort of healing justice conversation that I was inviting her into. I found myself just kind of repeatedly over and over, just wanting her to sort of meet me there. And it just became very clear that just given her inner tools, given her own research and her own sort of like lack of self-awareness at this, like somebody else named, it was impossible. And so I had to make a decision that I want to continue to sort of play this game where I continue to try to show up whole, to invite her in, give her language. At this point, I felt like I was managing down. And no matter how many conversations I did actually what Maritza offered in the chat that I said, I do that too. I have my group of confidants, if you will, right? My little clique of women, usually women of color outside of employment, that I go to and I say, am I nuts? Or is there like crazy making, pardon the word, happening in my space? Because like I'm so in it and I'm so committed to the work. I was in campaigns, sort of, advocacy position. And I was just like, sometimes I just need to be pulled back in, and I'm like, is this even worth the effort, right? And so I just ended up, I'm out of that employment as of a month ago. I just ended up leaving it altogether because I just couldn't do it anymore. I was very clear with this person and with others, actually. I was very vocal. I just told her that I literally ended up telling her, because she was very apologetic. She was very apologetic, and she knew that she didn't have what I needed, and she didn't have within her what I needed her to show up with. And so she was very apologetic about that. But an apology is not going to change it. I mean, if you're speaking to me about power building, about building power, transformative power, don't use the language of social justice. Don't co-op if you have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. So that would get me really angry, and it would get my insides going, right? And so like I ended up saying things like, we are in the group, like we need to redefine what we actually mean when we say building power, because what we're doing right now is not at all. We're kidding ourselves. We're not building any power. So I just said, I told her, you know, it's you can only give what you have, and unfortunately, you don't have what I'm asking for. And I was just very vocal and very direct. And there was a loss. There was a sense of loss. And there were times that I even felt like crying, but I was like, don't cry, Christina, because this is not the space to like cry, right? And anyhow, whatever, I'll leave it there. But I just wanted to speak to my own experience, that there was a sense of loss in it for me, because I really wanted her to get me. I really wanted her to get into the space of transformative change. And even though she said she learned so much from me, that she like was gonna miss me, and that, you know, like she would always want me to do these grounding, like the meditative pieces and all this, but I'm like, girl, like you're just not, you could learn this stuff. I've been trying to drag your ass along, and you're you're just not having it. You rather stayed in your white bubble with your white frameworks and your like very capitalist sort of white supremacist ways of working. And I'm trying to tell you, like, literally that is the cancer right there, and you're not listening. So anyhow, I'll stop there. But I just wanted to share my experience.
No, I appreciate it, Christina. It resonated with me and resonated with so many people around that. You know, sometimes we got to make that hard choice. And I felt you on when you said, "Oh, you always want me to come do the grounding," right? Oh man, uh, I used to be like, you know, it's hard living in the future, Christina. Like transformative work is future work. Half the time you waiting for mugs to catch up, and you're like, yeah, that was 30 years ago for me. Um, and it's frustrating, right? And like, I feel like for us, I think that's the reason why we spend a lot of time in conflict, because I'm just like, yo, you coming along or what, right? And so like, in all those spaces, I'm really glad that you chose yourself, and you chose like what was best for you and your spirit, you know, and always that sometimes you got to make that hard decision. Yeah. Thank you, Christina. Brenda, what's up with your little hand?
Hey.
Come through.
It's so I registered for this conference, and I saw this the option for conflict, and I rescheduled another meeting that I had because I was like, I gotta be here because I gotta manage conflict on Monday. Because I'm gonna put into practice what I learned. So it's so interesting because the way I manage conflict is like, girl, come on, talk to me. What's
Yeah.
up? And my colleague is doing it by email.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out with my team. I say, hey, let's talk about this. What's up? What's your availability? She responds back to me only and says, let's talk about it in leadership. And I'm like, I want to talk. And usually the way, like my process is the ORID of, all right, let's talk about what happened from your perspective, and then from my perspective or my other colleagues' perspective. How did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? How did that make me feel? We all share. What does that remind us of? Or what experience, you know, what could we have done to prevent it? Are there, you know, how do we want to move forward? So that's been my experience with other colleagues where we have intentionally like, this is what we're going to do, right? There's an agreement. But now that was my old team. It has totally changed. And I was like, oh, so now I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'm tempted to say, you know what? I don't really want to take it to leadership. I want to talk to you. I'm kind of seeing if, if I should do that, but that's where I'm with conflict right now. But I'm like, let's talk about it. I want to hear you. And but I totally do. What you talked about is like that discernment, or talk to someone, like to check myself too, right? Sometimes I'd be like, was it just me, or and that has always been helpful to think. And the hardest thing is to stay in it. Whew.
Yeah, we want that. A lot there, Brenda. A lot there. I hear you. You're in it now, right? You're like, yo, talk to me, right? And kind of goes back to like people have different conflict styles, right? Like some of us run and tell mommy, or papi, that's what we do. Some of us are like, catch me outside. Some of us are like, what's going on, or and some of us are like, I'm just not gonna say shit. Every time Brenda comes to me, I'm gonna run away, or try to find a place where like I feel safe, right? Um, and so that's true. And so even if you're like, for some people, even if you're like, yo, I want to talk to you about this, it might like for real for them might feel like, yo, Brenda's trying to like argue with me. She, like if people experience it so different, right? And I'm not trying to say that that's not their reality or your reality isn't real, but just like as we're people who are trying to usher or be a midwife to conflict so that it could be healthy for folks, that we're in the practice of it, right? Some of that is just like understanding it, right? And then like building that in. And yeah, I invite you to like, I don't know what it would be like for you to call her back in and be like, yo, can we just talk about it? What's happening here? I think my favorite line is like, yeah, what's going on? Like what's going on here? But yeah, I'm trying to make sure I catch like be with you and also like see some of the chat. Yeah, deep grief and disappointment. Oh, Christina, yeah, there's always that mourn of loss of like people and hopes for that space. Right. It's a healing process. I know people who are still healing from harm that's been done to them at work for many years. So I'm gonna send you so much love, Christina. Right. And for the whole, and just like I want to also tell you that like my experience with conflict is that sometimes it's just not done. Like you can pause it, right? Maybe you paused it with old girl, and when you're ready, and like that hurt or that conflict is a little bit further away from you, you can actually come back to it and be like, yo, some other place, some other time, right? Oh, I'm with you. And thank you, Brenda, for leading in around what's happening at work right now. People be doing the most, and I love how you're still committed to reflecting on like, yo, I'm gonna call my homegirl and be like, yo, what's happening with me right now? This is, what could it be? That curiosity. So how do we have these conversations, right? How do you approach someone? So you got beef, Brenda's like, let's talk about it. Old person's like, other person's like, I don't want to take it to leadership. Okay, so I'm gonna share a little bit about like how I prep myself to be in conversation and what I ask for when I lean into it. And you don't got to be in agreement with this. You'd be like, no, either I don't like it at all. Okay. So this is like my general guide, You know, after I spent some time thinking about my shit, I call the homegirl. You know, they say to me, Aida, you believe that no one's should be thrown away, right? That everybody should be part of this community. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. Why did I make that commitment? I always ask for transparent and direct conversation, and I seek consent first, right? Sometimes we'll have try to like, you know, when I see her at this party or when I see them at this party, I'm just gonna bring it up there. Some people really need to prepare themselves to be able to receive you and receive the conflict, right? And so I always ask for like, hey, I want to talk to you about like something that like this when this happened, I felt a certain kind of way and I want to talk to you about it, you know. And I'm always like, if you need a support person there, if you know this person is a conflict adverse person, then invite them to bring someone who can support them, right? And if you're not, you know, you're like, yo, I'm gonna tell you this, right? Like I always invite people to have support around them and always seek consent first. Because if not, the first response is again, they're gonna feel vulnerable. It's gonna trigger the amygdala response, and they're gonna either fight you, they're gonna try to like flee from the situation, they're going to try to appease you, and not really listen or be committed to something else, right? I heard a little bit about that when you were sharing, Christina. It's like your supervisor was like, hey, yeah, I know I'm really nice about it. But there was like really no clear action for changing behavior, right? So that's like one of the reasons why I always seek consent first, right? The next part of like having a conversation is that before I go in, I'm clear on what I want out of this conversation. And I also know that I gotta be open to listening to what's coming my way, right? Because I might feel right in all my ways, and I want to feel affirmed when I share my conflict with you, but most likely so do they. And so, because we're interdependent, because we say that we're committed to something together, you know, conflict is also part of that interdependence. Like, hey, you know, I want you to feel totally validated and affirmed in your experience the same way I want mine, right? But I'm always clear on what I want. Like, I'm clear on, yo, I need to know what I need out of this conversation. Those agreements, right? And so like the next part of that, the very last part is like I name how I have that conversation is it's a really simple format, right? I name the harm. I say, yo, I say to you, when you said this to me, right? This is how I felt about that. And I always tell people how you feel about something is never up for debate. And don't let anybody ever change that for you or challenge that. You felt that way, that shit's real, right? Um, and it's always from a place of like, yo, I want to restore this relationship, or we got to set a clear boundary out of this conversation, right? I'm gonna tell you how I feel. I want to tell you the impact that it had on me. Yo, like when we go into this meeting, this is how I felt about it. When the state you said that to me, I felt like I couldn't even be honest with you anymore, right? And so it made me feel like I couldn't even be in your like whatever that is for you, right? Just being really clear about the impact that it has on you, right? And then like clearly naming what you need. I've said this a bunch of times. Sometimes, and this is why the discernment part for yourself is so important. Because when sometimes so in our emotions or feelings around conflict that we can't even name what we want. But like that document that Trish dropped in the chat for me is like, do you actually know what love looks like for you, or safety looks like for you, or accountability, or respect as an individual? And so, because if you don't know, how are they gonna know? So be really clear on what you need moving forward. Like I always document our next steps, and there's always a process for accountability. So, hey, you know, Valerie, you said you and I agree on this, and so when it comes up, are you comfortable with me bringing it back up, right? Because some of these things are learned behaviors that we're not going to learn overnight. I just want to say that. Yeah, Valerie. Yeah, I got you. Right. And there's no right style to conflict. Like, again, I want to say this, like, if you're soft or hard or like you run away from it, I'm not saying my way is your right is the right way. I'm just saying this is the way I do it, and it's been the most helpful. And last, what I would say around conversation is that your attitude is everything. It is the number one teller of like if you're ready or not. So if you want to be like, I don't care what she got to say to me, I just want to tell her how I feel, then you're not really in a generative space. Right? You're more in like, I want to tell you what it is, right? Kind of space. And if your attitude is telling you, I'm so angry, I can't even talk, you're not ready for that conversation yet. You know, and if your attitude is saying fuck them, then you got to realign to see if this conversation is even worth it, right? The emotional torment. So I wanted to pause there around how folks are feeling, if they had any questions um, around that process, right? And I'm really super curious if folks are yeah, how you feeling about that? Do you have a different way that works for you? Can you say more about that, Erica?
I think usually when I'm in conflict, I focus so much attention on not liking being in conflict that I don't actually pay attention to like what the resolution is or could be. So getting is part of the conversation with myself with a friend or my notes, focusing on, okay, aside from the feeling, discomfort of being in conflict, if I put that aside and I just focus on what I actually need to be different, then I might be able to engage in that conversation about conflict differently.
Yeah. I think for like the first 2 days, all I do is think about the conflict and how I don't like it. Right? I don't. I see a message on here. Andrea says, yes to all of this. Thank you, Trish. I am wondering, too, something Cindy said in the plenary yesterday about standing in contradiction with people. Yeah. And like, we are working from an abolitionist frame and don't believe in throwing people away. Is that discernment piece Trish spoke to? That is the difference in knowing when to accept and we got to stop here or our own sanity. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jillian says, where you at, Jillian? You've been quiet. I want to hear, what do you sound like?
I know. I was very sort of lurking, like I'm here, my partner's on the floor doing yoga.
I like it.
So that was part of the hiding. I've had lots of thoughts and responses and emotions and loving, appreciating so deeply the sharing. I think the vulnerability, I mean, I don't know about others, but like there's one conflict, right? That's sitting on my heart right now. So as you're talking, I just keep going back to it. I'm like, yes, resources, insight, help, and it will help. It will. I'm so thankful. Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say like conflict is so similar to grief, right? You can feel so similar to grief. It's so overwhelming that sometimes we don't really know what to do with it. It can feel so isolating, you know, and um I love like when you said it sits on my like you're having a conflict that's just sitting on your heart. I was like, that's where like usually it sits for me too. I'm like, oh shit. And what's that process of like the before and after, right? Because even after we're done being in that conflict, it doesn't like it just flows away like it's all done. There's a rebuilding of trust of like, okay, we gotta now try something moving forward, and I don't know how I feel about that, right? But I made a commitment. So yeah.
I have a question. Just something that's, well, I also just wanted to echo the appreciation. And especially for the folks who are like sharing their experiences. It's like never required for you to like, replay um your trauma or things that you're carrying, but I do want to acknowledge it and appreciate it. Especially because like it's really for me, I'm like, oh, there's like a lot of times I think about generative conflict in the context of like there's a group of us that are already committed to what's on the other side. Like we actually do have this like shared commitment to liberation. And so it's like even if we don't get it right, I'm with a group of people who at least are coming from like a shared politics, right? So like most of the spaces, it's like, all right, we got off track and we're just trying to like right ourselves, right? We're getting back into agreement, which is very different from what a lot of people are describing, right? And so it's making me think about like when does mediation come in, right? Like a lot of what we're talking about here is how individuals approach conflict, like interpersonal or between each other. But can you talk a little bit about like when we kind of have to be in space with each other, or like have to be in relationship with each other, and we haven't reached that agreement? Like, what is the kind of like how do you know when mediation is necessary, and like what's the difference in terms of how you approach that? I guess is something that's coming up for me.
Yeah, I also want to name that Raquel asked this earlier, and I meant to come back to it. So I'm gonna drop Raquel's question. It's similar, like connected. So um, thanks for the grace, Raquel. Or Raquel, I don't know. I like rolling that R. Yeah. So there's mediator. So yeah, that's a really good question. Easier to answer the question on the organizational level, you know. I'm gonna say always bring it. I feel like conflict in an organization that's just like super heavy and thick, that does not have a culture of accountability or a culture of agreements where we can actually lean into conflict. Um, I would say that like bring in the mediator to help set up a culture, a container for it. And I would say that I say this because many times the emotional labor of cleaning house and laying it, of tending to all of this falls on a woman of color, right? And it's usually the person that does the groundings and the healings and or is already doing all the other non-mentioned emotional labor that is keeping people alive in the organization anyway, right? You know who you are. People color, people coming to you all the time being like, yo, I hate so and so. I can't stand it. Look what they did to me today. You know, look at Brenda about to, you know what I'm talking about, Brenda. You know, you nodding. I see you with the glasses. So, yeah, I would say if there's not a container and everybody, the capacity is low on the organization, bring in a mediator, right? Because sometimes that shit feels so close and so heavy and so personal. No one present is able to see through all the shit. Be very honest about that. And by that time we're not showing up as our best selves. We're not showing up like completely committed to something. That our purpose or our mission, it's like at that moment, what I've witnessed, it's like always like I gotta preserve whatever I can, you know. So I would say that. I would say like interpersonally, my experience has been you could bring in a third person, and it doesn't have to be a professional. It could be like a third friend that know that I would actually say somebody like that knows you, but is neutral between you, right? And in Adrienne Marie Brown's "We Will Not Cancel Us," right? There's like a really good structure in there how you have those conversations with each other around like how do we handle interpersonal conflict, right? And I would say, oh, there's some good stuff here too. All right, Guelu, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So bringing that, and sometimes like it's always hard to find sometimes a neutral that's someone who's like who can like hold both of it and not get caught up in the drama, right? There should be someone who's not gonna like be talking to you so and so behind your back and talking to the other. It should be like a neutral party who is like also committed to y'all finding a resolution, right? And again, your attitude will know. You'll know when you're ready to have that conversation with that person. You know. Hmm. Yeah. Is that helpful? Did I answer that, Trish and Raquel? I think I answered. Okay. Roll that R for me. I got you, Raquel. Cool. Yeah. Um, yeah, like, I find it easier to do, like I said, to mediate and handle conflict for other people outside of me, right? Outside of my personal work than it is for my stuff. So I always calling in people to help me out. What's up, ISA? And one of our current conflicts I'm working through, even multiple mediated sessions have not been working. And now that person we're in conflict with is taking things to the public community. A lot of harm and violence to the point where I don't want to interact with the process anymore. Really sitting with a lot of yeah, next steps and come back into the work. I don't know if you guys ever heard of someone named Holiday Simmons. You know, Holiday Simmons is a trauma-informed trainer. And when we started building out a program for formerly incarcerated like women and directly impacted women a long time ago, right? And we knew conflict was going to show up. I mean, conflict was deep. And I'm telling you the story because I hope it's helpful. Right? And I just want to tell you sometimes what I was sitting with Holiday once and he was like, you got to recognize that there's nothing you can do or build that will ever get rid of conflict. So you got to learn how to build that muscle now. Got to learn how to demand that people love you and respect you and treat you. And then you also have to be like, know how to call people in and hold them accountable, right? And then he said something that to me that has changed my life about how I deal with certain people, even though I love them deeply and I want them to be part of it. If they have not done their healing work, they will not recognize the love and the space you're trying to create or your intentions, right? It's just not possible for them to witness it, to see it, to be with it. And because they have not known anything but to fight and conflict, right? Not besides fight and be in chaos, I meant to say, not conflict. They are unable to recognize it, right? So they'll do anything in their power to destroy it, right? So any efforts that are made, anything you want to lean into, they're just going to destroy it because it feels so unsafe for them. No matter what you do, it just shows up as something else, as harm, right? And we also got to recognize when we're in this conflict work as like we're like midwives to this again, that not everybody's ready at the same time, and it's gonna get ugly, right? It's gonna take a lot of emotional labor. Right. And the invitation to you is always for you, Aya. Like when you look on it to be grounded in your purpose and your commitment. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm in practice with y'all. Like, I need to know too. Like, I be struggling, you know? Let's see. Yeah. It's a good comment though, Audrey. You don't have to delete it. It's still good. Um, we're headed into 5:15. I know we're gonna go till 5:30, my loves. But I I was gonna pause my presentation at this moment and just invite you to lean in with us here, right? If there's anything else, any good medicine you wanted to share, right? And I wanted to share a couple of resources with you that I super love while you're trying to figure all this out too, right? And so if anybody has like a last burning thing, I'm happy to I would love to hear it. Or any last question before we close out here. I'm gonna drop these resources in the chat. Oh, thank you. I'm seeing the appreciations. All right. Is that you, my Caroline?
Yeah.
Come through, girl.
Well, I don't know, I've just had systems on my mind and all that, and imperialism, colonialism, and just thinking like what was coming up for me is just like there's like the conflict avoidance that's been in me
Mm.
for generations. It's like embedded in the system and embedded in the Catholicism that I grew up with, which I'm no longer a part of, but it was, hiding and don't say anything. And it's just so there. And like, I think I do it, I think I'm doing well with work for sure. But I mean, as far as like doing this, like in my workplace and being pretty open to all conversations and doing that, it's harder at home, of course, but it's still getting better. But it's like, I think what's hitting me is like, how do I know? How do I know? I'm like, is this actually working, or am I like on the down low continuing to do this and I'm just not even noticing because it took me so long to even notice that I was doing it, So it's like maybe mistrust of myself too.
So I just needed a little clarity. So you're asking, how do you know what exactly? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And if
I
you
guess.
speak up just a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think some of it is just like this noticing that it's in my DNA for so long. How do I trust myself that I'm doing this? Like everything you're saying sounds great, and I feel like I've done some bits, and it's more like stuff that I'm learning and I want to practice, and also like avoiding a bunch of stuff or that I'm not even noticing. Because I feel like that's a big thing that I just don't trust about myself. It's like that because I've done that, my family's done that, and I'm like, "Ugh."
Yeah. Ooh, you said a lot there. I mean, yes, religion, culture, yes. It being in your DNA, being told not to speak up, that experience with punishment that comes with it. My Caroline, y'all, so I know my Caroline. I'm just gonna say I've never experienced you that way to be. I'm really surprised you're saying that. I'm like not trying to like. I'm really like just surprised, but I just want to say that. How will you know? Look, babe, this is what I know about you, my Caroline. I know that you're committed to real race and gender justice equity, right? And I would say that like you should trust your gut around the process and how to move forward. Cause like what I know about you is that you like to treat people with the same dignity that you want for yourself, right? And again, like the conflict is such a gap in the movement that like trying it, even if you fuck up, is okay, right? So I'm just gonna encourage you not to be afraid of it and to lean into it, because all of it's a learning process, right? All of it is, and so is that what you're talking about? You were saying, how will you know that like you're conflict avoidant? I'm like realizing something right now. 1, 2. Talk to me, buddy.
Yeah, I think what you had said right now is like to trust myself and trust some of the other traits that you're talking about that other people see. But I think I've just not trusted myself to know, because I feel like my discovery of things about myself, it feels like it took so long, but it's really that nobody talks about it. So then you know, it's actually takes this long. um, and so, I mean, I think, thank you. Maybe I just needed to hear you say that.
Yeah. You should have saw Trish's face when you were like, I was like, what? He's like, no, I don't mean to disregard. That's real, you know. I still like I said, we're in a community of practice, right? This is me trying to be committed to like I want everyone to learn how to fight with each other, right? One, because I'm tired, and then two, right? Like, it ain't gonna get us somewhere if we're like, if like we're not gonna land over, we're not gonna build the world we want to see if we're just gonna be shitty people when we arrive, right? So learning how to be in conflict with each other is part of it, and being committed to something larger is that second part. But you are, my Caroline. You are incredible. I mean, you've held me accountable multiple times, so it's interesting. Let's see, Ayano, Aya, is here, echoing the deep gratitude. Oh, yeah, yeah. Just reading it in the chat. Yes, baby, we're in it together. Interdependence. You know, you'll if you know me, you'll know that I always yell that out whenever I get a chance. You know, we're in this together. You don't got to figure this out on your own. And I really always recommend that, from every ounce of me. I'm gonna pause here to like move us into this. I hate giving resources, and I always hate giving like housekeeping. Like, you know, if you need something, this is what you do. But there is some good shit out here, yo. There really is. Like, when I started doing conflict work, like there wasn't a lot out there, and I was just like creating it, you know, and practicing it, and inviting people into this process with me until like I developed my muscle and be like, oh, I know what that is, you know. And I still haven't right. I still struggle with it, but there's some really good stuff. First of all, selfish plug, callingitup.com. There's like so many resources. Just a couple of things in the chat. There's so many resources about how you create a container. How do you be in generative conflict? How do you set agreements there? How do you create a liberated space for leadership and movement? It's so yummy. You know, it's so yummy, babes, you know. Go to Calling It Up. There's this woman who I don't know who she is, but she's incredible. If you have Instagram, Transforming Conflict, boom, baby, like it is incredible. It's like my daily spot. When I ain't got it, I go and I can't get a hold of the homegirl. I go to Instagram and I go to Transforming Conflict, and I'm like, oh, this is how I tell somebody I can't stand them right now. Okay, thank you for helping me be a better person. Always, forever, the homie Adrienne Marie Brown. We will not cancel us. The Conflict Center has some great worksheets. Like if you're like, yo, I don't even know what's going on with me either. I need some questions. I need like a process. They have so many. They have one on accountability. They have stuff on like how do you escalate your conflict. They have so many good stuff. And then, of course, I gotta write it down. The homie that reminds you of your commitment. They are sacred, magic, human, unicorn things from another planet. Love on them. Because I know that probably includes you. You're probably you're that person for someone else. But I always recommend that. We gotta break the isolation, you know. You gotta figure it out on your own. Those are the resources I'll share. I'm gonna also like just drop this link, and I'll send it over to Karishi, and you know y'all can have this whole thing. And look at Ananda. Ananda's got some good stuff in this. Yeah, thank you for being so generous, y'all. All right, I'm gonna invite you to breathe with me, right? I'm gonna invite you to sit back in your chair. If you can, put your feet on the ground if you can. And just, you know, we're getting kind of kinks out. Get that out of here. Yeah, right. Had a whole conversation around conflict. I want to take care of you for a second. You can put your one hand over your heart if you want, or your belly, wherever that conflict's sitting right now. Maybe it's on your shoulders. And I just want you to take a deep breath in with me. So let's breathe in, breathe in. Feel that spot in. Hold it and exhale. It's gonna be okay. I invite you to take another deep breath in. All the way in. And exhale. I'm just gonna remind you, you don't have to figure it out all on your own. I'm gonna invite you to take one last deep breath in. And exhale. I'm just gonna make an invitation to always just trust yourself when it comes to these hard moments. And remember that I either promised you that it's better on the other side. You can hold me to that. My loves, you have graced me with your time and your generosity and just being with me, and I learned so much from y'all. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for just trying this on today. Yeah. Send you so much love. You got this shit. Hit me up if you ever need anything, you know. And I send you with lots of love, right? And resources. Look at this chat. Yummy. Right? All right, y'all. Well, yes. I'll see y'all later. Have an incredible weekend. Adios.
Gracias, Aida.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much, Aida.
You're
Thank you. That was
welcome.
beautiful.
Thank
Gracias.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's up?
Adios, Raquel. Yes. Oh, such great people. Christina, thank you. Oh. Yeah.